The dust devil spinning across the barren California trail should have warned Zara Matthews that her luck was about to run out. But she had stopped believing in omens 3 years ago when they buried her husband in Missouri dirt. Now, as the rear wheel of her wagon splintered with a crack that echoed across the empty landscape, she felt nothing but a weary acceptance that matched the relentless July heat of 1876. The mule brayed in protest as the wagon lurched sideways, sending her supply crates sliding across the bed. Zara gripped the reins tight enough to feel the leather bite into her palms, her jaw set in that familiar expression of stubborn determination that had carried her across half the continent. She climbed down from the driver's seat, her worn boots hitting the packed earth with a soft thud. The wheel was beyond repair. 3 spokes snapped clean through, the iron rim twisted at an angle that would make travel impossible. She was still 20 miles from Porterville, according to the last marker she had passed, with the sun beginning its slow descent toward the western mountains. The isolation of the California wilderness pressed in around her, broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. Zara refused to cry. She had used up all her tears in the dark months after Thomas died, leaving her with nothing but debt, and the crushing realization that his business partners would take everything she had left. So she had packed what remained, sold what she could, and headed west with a vague plan to start over in California, where nobody knew her as the widow of a failed merchant. At 24 years old, she was too young to feel this old, too tired to feel this anger that burned steady in her chest like a low fire that never quite went out. She pulled her canteen from the wagon and took a measured sip. Water was precious out here, and she had learned to ration it carefully during the weeks of travel. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling hills covered in dry grass the color of wheat, dotted with dark oaks that offered precious little shade. The trail wound through this terrain like a pale ribbon, rutted from countless wagon wheels before hers. That was when she heard the hoofbeats. Zara's hand instinctively moved to the rifle she kept tucked beside the driver's seat. She had learned to shoot as a girl, her father insisting that any daughter of his needed to know how to protect herself, but she had never actually aimed at another human being. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs as the sound grew closer, and she told herself to stay calm, to assess the situation before assuming the worst. The rider came around the bend at an easy pace, sitting tall in the saddle on a buckskin horse that looked like it could run for days without tiring. Even from a distance, Zara could see he was a cowboy, from the wide-brimmed hat down to the dusty chaps and spurs that caught the afternoon light. He slowed when he spotted her wagon, his posture shifting slightly, and she knew he was making his own assessment of the situation. "Afternoon," he called out as he approached, keeping his hands visible on the reins in a gesture she recognized as intentional courtesy. "Looks like you have got some trouble." His voice was deep and steady, with a slight drawl that spoke of years spent under open skies. As he drew closer, Zara could make out more details. A strong jaw shadowed with a few days' worth of stubble, eyes the color of creek water in summer, and a weathered face that suggested he was somewhere in his late 20s. There was something careful in the way he moved, a deliberate slowness that seemed designed to keep from startling her. "The wheel broke," Zara said, keeping her voice level and her hand near the rifle. "I can manage." The cowboy dismounted with fluid grace, looping his horse's reins over a scrubby bush. He walked toward the damaged wheel, studying it with the kind of attention that came from years of practical experience. Zara watched him warily, noting the way he kept a respectful distance, never moving between her and the wagon where her rifle rested. "Name is Bennett Atwood," he said, crouching down to examine the broken spokes more closely. "I work at the Three Rivers Ranch about 15 miles south of here. Been riding fence lines all week." He glanced up at her, squinting against the sun. "That wheel is not going to get you anywhere. You have got a spare." "No," Zara admitted, the word bitter in her mouth. She had started this journey with a spare wheel, but had to sell it in Nevada to buy food and water when her funds ran lower than expected. "I am Zara Matthews. I was headed to Porterville." Bennett stood up, dusting his hands on his chaps. "That is still a fair distance, especially on foot in this heat. I've got tools back at the ranch that could fix this, or at least patch it enough to get you to town." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I can ride back, get what is needed, and return before dark. Or I can help you unhitch that mule and you can ride it to the ranch. Leave the wagon here for now." Zara studied him, trying to read the intention behind his offer. She had learned the hard way that help always came with strings attached, that people rarely did things out of pure kindness. But she was practical enough to recognize that her options were limited. She could refuse his help and spend the night out here, hoping another traveler came along who might be more trustworthy. Or she could accept, take the calculated risk that this cowboy was what he appeared to be, someone offering assistance to a stranded stranger. "Why would you help me?" she asked bluntly. Bennett's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been surprise or respect flickering across his face. "Because you need help," he said simply. "And because out here we take care of each other. It is not always easy country, and folks have got to look out for one another." He adjusted his hat, shading his eyes. "But I understand if you would rather wait. I can leave you my canteen, at least. Looks like yours is getting low." There was no judgment in his voice, no irritation at her suspicion. That, more than anything, made Zara begin to lower her guard. A man with ill intentions would have pressed harder, would have tried to convince her with charm or intimidation. Bennett seemed content to make his offer and accept whatever decision she made. "If you can fix the wheel enough to get me to Porterville, I can pay you," Zara said. "Not much, but something." "Did not ask for payment," Bennett replied, "but we can discuss that after we get this sorted out." He moved back toward his horse. "I am going to head back to the ranch, get the tools and some wood we can use for splints on those spokes. Should be back in a couple hours." "You will be all right here," Zara nodded, still wary but beginning to feel a cautious flicker of hope. "I will be fine." Bennett mounted his horse with easy skill, settling into the saddle like he had been born there. "Keep that rifle close," he said, and she realized he had noticed her weapon after all. "Most folks around here are decent, but it is good to be careful." Then he wheeled his horse around and set off at a ground-eating lope, dust rising in small clouds behind him. Zara watched until he disappeared around the bend, then let out a long breath she had not realized she was holding. She looked at her broken wagon, at the endless stretch of empty land around her, and felt the familiar weight of isolation settle over her shoulders. This was what her life had become, dependent on the kindness of strangers, vulnerable in ways she had never been when Thomas was alive. She pushed those thoughts away and focused on practical matters. She dragged her supply crates closer together, making sure everything was secure. She checked her water supply again and allowed herself another small sip. The sun was lower now, painting the hills in shades of amber and gold, and she could feel the temperature just beginning to drop from its brutal peak. The 2 hours stretched long. Zara sat in the shade of the wagon, her rifle across her lap, and watched the trail. A lizard skittered across a nearby rock. The hawk she had heard earlier cried out again, a lonely sound that seemed to echo her own isolation. She thought about Porterville, about the letter she had received from a distant cousin who had settled there, and offered her a place to stay until she could get on her feet. She thought about starting over, about building a new life from the wreckage of her old one. She thought about the walls she had built around her heart, brick by brick, during those long months after Thomas died. The walls that kept her safe but also kept her alone. The sound of hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. Bennett was returning, his buckskin horse moving at that same steady pace. He had a pack strapped behind his saddle and carried a long piece of wood across the pommel. As he drew closer, Zara felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. He had come back, just as he said he would. "Found some oak that should work," Bennett said as he dismounted. He untied the pack and the wood, laying everything out on the ground with the methodical efficiency of someone used to working with his hands. "And I brought some extra water and food, figured you might be running low." "I told you I could pay," Zara said, standing up and moving closer to watch him work. "And I told you I was not asking for payment," Bennett replied without looking up. He was examining the broken wheel again, his fingers tracing the damage. "These 3 spokes are done, but the rest are solid. If I can splint them and reinforce the rim, it should hold well enough to get you to town. Might take me a while, though. This kind of work cannot be rushed." Zara watched as he unpacked his tools. A saw, a hammer, several sizes of nails, strips of metal that could be bent to form braces, leather straps for binding. He worked with quiet concentration, measuring the oak against the broken spokes, marking where he needed to cut. The saw made a rhythmic whisper as he worked, and wood shavings fell like snow into the dust. "You do this often?" Zara asked. "Fix broken wagons?" "Fix whatever needs fixing," Bennett said. "Fences mostly, gates, barn doors." "Wagon wheels are not so different, just a matter of understanding how weight distributes and what needs to be strong enough to hold." He glanced up at her. "Where are you coming from?" "Missouri originally. Then Illinois for a while, Nevada most recently." Zara hesitated, then added, "I am widowed." 3 years now. Heading to Porterville to stay with a cousin while I figure out what comes next." Bennett nodded, his expression sympathetic but not pitying. "That is rough. I am sorry for your loss." He went back to his work, carefully fitting the first replacement spoke into place. "Porterville is a decent town, growing fast. Lots of opportunities for folks willing to work hard." "What about you?" Zara asked, surprising herself with the question. "You always been a ranch hand, born into it more or less." "My father worked cattle in Texas, moved the family to California when I was about 15. That was back in '67. Bennett hammered a nail into place with precise strikes. "I have been at 3 Rivers for about 8 years now. It is good work, honest work. The owners treat us fair and the land is beautiful if you like open spaces." "Do you?" Zara asked. "Like open spaces?" Bennett paused, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It was the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more approachable. "I do," he said. "Never been much for crowds or cities. Out here you have got room to breathe, room to think. The land does not lie to you or try to be something it is not." There was something in the way he said it that resonated with Zara, echoing her own feelings about the falseness she had encountered in so-called civilized society. The business associates who had smiled to Thomas's face while planning to take everything. The friends who had disappeared when the money ran out. The casual cruelty of people who measured worth in dollars and status. "I understand that," she said quietly. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, broken only by the sounds of Bennett's work. Zara found herself watching his hands, noting the strength in them, the careful precision of his movements. He was not rushing, but he was not wasting time either. Every action had purpose, every movement efficient. There was something reassuring about his competence, about the way he approached the problem with calm confidence. The sun continued its descent, and the shadows grew longer. Bennett worked steadily, replacing each broken spoke, reinforcing the rim with metal braces, binding everything together with leather straps that he tightened with practiced skill. He stopped occasionally to check his work, spinning the wheel slightly to test its stability, making minute adjustments. "You are good at this," Zara observed. "Had plenty of practice," Bennett replied. "And I like working with my hands. There is something satisfying about taking something broken and making it whole again." He looked up at her, and their eyes met. "Gives you a sense that things can be fixed, you know. That damage does not have to be permanent." Zara felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the walls she had built so carefully. She looked away, uncomfortable with the sudden vulnerability she felt. "Some things cannot be fixed," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Maybe not," Bennett agreed, "but some things can, and it is worth trying to figure out which is which." He stood up, wiping his hands on his chaps. "That should do it. Let me get this wheel back on and we can test it out." He lifted the wheel, muscles flexing under his shirt, and maneuvered it back onto the axle. The process took strength and leverage, and Zara moved to help without being asked, steadying the wagon while he worked. Their hands brushed once, accidentally, and Zara felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. She pulled back quickly, confused by her own reaction. It had been so long since she had felt anything beyond grief and anger and weary determination. This sudden consciousness of Bennett as a man, not just as a helpful stranger, unsettled her. If Bennett noticed her reaction, he gave no sign. He finished securing the wheel, tested it thoroughly, then stepped back to survey his work. "Try moving the wagon," he said. "Just a few feet, nice and slow." Zara climbed up to the driver's seat and picked up the reins. She clicked her tongue at the mule, who had been dozing in the shade, and felt the wagon begin to roll forward. The repaired wheel turned smoothly, holding steady under the weight. She drove forward about 20 feet, then backed up, testing it from both directions. The wheel held. "It is perfect," she said, climbing back down. Relief washed over her, so intense it made her knees weak. She had been more frightened than she wanted to admit, more aware of how precarious her situation was. "Thank you. Truly, I do not know how to thank you enough." "You just did," Bennett said. He began gathering his tools, packing everything away with the same methodical care he had shown throughout. "But it is getting late, and you should not try to make Porterville tonight. That wheel will hold, but I would not want to push it too hard right away. Give the wood a chance to settle, the leather to stretch into place." "I can camp here," Zara said. "I have done it before." Bennett frowned slightly. "You could. But the ranch is only about 30 minutes south, and my boss's wife would have my hide if she knew I left a lady to camp alone when we have got spare beds and a good kitchen." He held up his hand as Zara started to protest. "I know what you are thinking, and I understand the caution. But Alina 3 Rivers is one of the strongest, kindest women you will ever meet, and she has got very firm opinions about hospitality. You would be doing me a favor by coming. Besides, we can check that wheel again in the morning, make sure it is holding up before you continue on." Zara hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to not accept more help than absolutely necessary. But the practical part of her mind pointed out that Bennett was right. It would be foolish to push the wagon too hard right away, and camping alone was never completely safe. And there was something about Bennett's steady presence that made her want to trust him. "All right," she said finally, "but just for tonight, I will leave at first light." "Fair enough," Bennett said. He mounted his horse, then looked down at her. "Follow me. It is an easy road, well maintained. Just take it slow and steady." Zara climbed back onto the wagon and gathered the reins. As the mule began to plod forward, following Bennett's horse, she found herself thinking about walls and how they could become prisons as much as protection. She thought about Bennett's words, about things that could be fixed and things that could not. She thought about the way his hands had moved with such careful confidence, and the way his eyes had met hers with honest directness. The sun was setting in earnest now, painting the California sky in shades of orange and purple and deep rose. The air was cooling rapidly, that desert phenomenon where temperatures dropped as soon as the sun disappeared. Bennett rode ahead at a pace the wagon could match easily, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was managing all right. They traveled in silence, but it was a companionable silence rather than an awkward one. Zara found herself relaxing slightly, letting some of the constant tension ease from her shoulders. The trail curved through gentle hills, following the contour of the land, and she could see cattle in the distance, dark shapes moving slowly across the grassland. The Three Rivers Ranch came into view as they crested a low rise. It was larger than Zara had expected, a sprawling collection of buildings clustered around a main house that was built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. There were several barns, a bunkhouse, various sheds and outbuildings, all well maintained and organized. Even in the fading light, she could see the signs of a prosperous, well-run operation. "That is the main house," Bennett said, pointing. "The boss, Jacob Three Rivers, he built this place up from nothing about 20 years ago. He and Alina have 3 children, all grown now. 2 of the sons help run the ranch, and the daughter is teaching school in Sacramento." They approached the main house, and Zara could see a woman emerge onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about her presence, a sense of quiet authority. "Bennett Atwood," the woman called out, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "You are late for supper and you have brought company. I hope you have got a good explanation." "Found this lady stranded with a broken wagon wheel," Bennett called back. "Fixed it up, but it is too late for her to make Porterville tonight. Thought you might have room for one more at your table." Alina Three Rivers came down the porch steps, moving with surprising grace for a woman who looked to be in her 50s. She had silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a face that suggested she had seen plenty of hardship, but had not let it make her bitter. She studied Zara with frank assessment. "Of course we have room," Alina said firmly. "Any woman brave enough to travel alone is welcome at my table." She extended her hand to Zara, and her handshake was strong and warm. "I am Alina Three Rivers. You have already met Bennett, who is entirely too modest about his own skills. Come inside, both of you. Supper is waiting and you both look like you could use a good meal." Zara found herself being shepherded toward the house. Her protests about not wanting to impose brushed aside with practiced efficiency. Bennett took care of unhitching the mule and securing her wagon, and before she quite knew how it had happened, Zara was sitting at a long wooden table in a warm kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and roasted meat. The Three Rivers family welcomed her with the kind of easy hospitality that seemed to be second nature. Jacob Three Rivers was a tall man with weathered features and kind eyes, who shook her hand with genuine warmth. Their 2 sons, Marcus and Daniel, were in their early 20s, both with their father's build and their mother's sharp intelligence. They made room at the table without fuss, passing dishes and making light conversation that did not pry into her circumstances. Bennett sat across from her, and Zara found herself acutely aware of his presence. She watched the way he interacted with the family, the easy affection and mutual respect. This was clearly a place where he belonged, where he was valued. It made her feel the absence of such belonging in her own life, the way she had been drifting since Thomas died with no real anchor. "So you are headed to Porterville," Alina said, passing Zara a bowl of potatoes. "Do you have family there?" "A cousin," Zara said. "We have never met in person, but she has written that she would help me get established." She hesitated, then added, "I am a widow. My husband died 3 years ago, and I am looking to start over somewhere new." Alina nodded, her expression sympathetic. "That takes courage. Starting over is never easy, especially alone. But Porterville is a good town, full of good people. You will find your footing there, I am sure." The meal continued with comfortable conversation. Zara learned that the Three Rivers Ranch ran about 2,000 head of cattle, that Marcus was planning to marry a girl from Porterville in the fall, that Daniel had a talent for training horses that had made him something of a local legend. She learned that Bennett had once tracked a lost child for 2 days through rough country and brought him home safely, though Bennett himself brushed off the story as nothing special. She also learned, by listening and observing, that this family genuinely cared for each other. They disagreed sometimes, debating the best way to handle various ranch matters, but there was no malice in it, no power games or manipulation. It was so different from her experience with Thomas's family, with their constant jockeying for position and advantage, that it made her chest ache with something like longing. After supper, Alina showed Zara to a small bedroom on the second floor. It was simply furnished but spotlessly clean, with a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the ranch. There was fresh water in a pitcher on the dresser and clean towels folded neatly on the bed. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need," Alina said. "But I understand if you want to push on to Porterville. Just know that the door is always open if you need help." "Thank you," Zara said, meaning it deeply. "Your kindness means more than I can say." Alina patted her hand. "We take care of our own out here. And any friend of Bennett's is a friend of ours." After Alina left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from stranded and frightened to safe and fed, surrounded by warmth and kindness. It was disorienting, this sudden shift, and she did not quite know what to do with the feelings it stirred up. She thought about Bennett, about the careful way he had approached her, respecting her boundaries while still offering genuine help. She thought about his words, about things that could be fixed. She thought about the way her heart had stuttered when their hands touched, that unexpected flutter of awareness. It terrified her. Zara had built her walls for a reason. After Thomas died, after the betrayals and the disappointments, she had decided it was safer to rely only on herself. Love made you vulnerable. Trust made you weak. She had learned those lessons thoroughly, and she was not eager to unlearn them. But as she lay in the comfortable bed in the Three Rivers home, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch settling for the night, she could not quite silence the small voice that whispered maybe. Maybe not everyone was untrustworthy. Maybe not all help came with strings attached. Maybe some walls were meant to come down. She fell asleep thinking about creek-water eyes and capable hands, and she dreamed of broken things being made whole. Morning came with the crow of a rooster and the sound of men moving around the ranch yard. Zara woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks, though she was not entirely sure why. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was already bustling. Alina was at the stove and Bennett sat at the table with Jacob, both men nursing cups of coffee and discussing the day's work. They looked up as Zara entered and Bennett stood immediately, pulling out a chair for her. "Morning," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Zara admitted. "Thank you again for everything." "Sit down and eat," Alina ordered, setting a plate in front of her before she could protest. "You have got a long drive ahead and you will need your strength." Over breakfast, Bennett explained that he had already checked her wagon wheel that morning and it was holding up well. "Should get you to Porterville without trouble," he said. "But take it easy on rough sections of road. Give those repairs time to fully set." "I will," Zara promised. She hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said about paying you. It is not much, but it is only fair." Bennett shook his head. "Keep your money. You will need it more than I do for getting settled in town." He met her eyes steadily. "If you really want to repay me, just promise you will let folks help you when you need it. Accepting help is not weakness. It is just being human." The words hit Zara harder than she expected. She looked away, throat tight. "That is not always easy for me," she said quietly. "I know," Bennett said, his voice gentle, "but maybe that is something worth working on." An hour later, Zara was ready to leave. Her mule was hitched to the wagon, her supplies secured. The Three Rivers family gathered to see her off, and Alina packed a basket of food for her journey over Zara's protests. "Porterville is about 4 hours at a steady pace," Bennett said. He was mounted on his buckskin, and Zara realized he intended to accompany her. At her questioning look, he added, "Just want to make sure that wheel holds up, and the first part of the road can be tricky if you do not know it." Zara should have protested. She should have insisted she could manage alone, but instead she found herself saying, "All right, thank you." They set off into the cool morning air, the sun just beginning to warm the land. The trail was indeed tricky in places, winding through rocky sections where Bennett's knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable. He guided her around the worst ruts and warned her about spots where the ground was softer than it looked. As they traveled, they talked. It started with practical matters, Bennett explaining the local geography and pointing out landmarks. But gradually, the conversation deepened. Zara found herself telling him about Thomas, about the good early years of their marriage before his business started failing, before the stress and worry changed him into someone she barely recognized. "He was not a bad man," she said, "just a desperate one. And desperation makes people do things they would not otherwise do. It makes them blind to consequences." "What happened after he died?" Bennett asked gently. "His business partners claimed I owed them money, that Thomas had taken loans I knew nothing about. They seized everything. The house, the shop, even furniture that had been my grandmother's." Zara's hands tightened on the reins. "I fought as much as I could, but I had no legal standing. A widow's rights are not worth much, apparently." "That is not right," Bennett said, anger edging into his usually calm voice. "No, it is not," Zara agreed. "But it is legal, and that is what matters in the eyes of the law." She glanced at him. "That is when I learned that I could only count on myself, that trusting other people was a good way to get hurt." Bennett was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I understand why you would feel that way," he said finally. "But I hope you know that not everyone is like those business partners. Some people actually mean what they say. Some people keep their promises." "How do you tell the difference?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. "Time," Bennett said simply. "And paying attention to what people do, not just what they say. Words are easy. Actions take effort, and that effort says something about who a person really is." They rode on in silence for a while, and Zara thought about his words. She thought about how Bennett had spent hours fixing her wagon without being asked, without expecting payment. She thought about how Alina had welcomed her into her home, fed her, and sent her off with provisions. She thought about actions and effort, and what they revealed about character. The sun climbed higher, and the landscape changed gradually as they traveled. The rolling grasslands gave way to areas with more trees, and Zara could see signs of more frequent settlement. Fences marking property boundaries, occasional houses in the distance, more defined roads. They were approaching civilization, and she felt a strange reluctance that she could not quite explain. "Tell me about yourself," Zara said, wanting to prolong the conversation to keep Bennett talking. "You said your family came from Texas. You have siblings." "Two brothers and a sister," Bennett said. "All younger. My brothers both stayed in Texas working different ranches. My sister married a farmer in Oregon. I see them when I can, but it is not often. Out here, distances are just too great for casual visits." "You miss them?" "Sometimes," Bennett admitted. "But we write letters and I know they are doing well. That is enough most days." He adjusted his hat against the glare of the sun. "What about you? Any siblings?" "A brother," Zara said. "Older. He married a woman from Boston and moved east. We have not spoken in 2 years. He thought I should have fought harder to keep Thomas's estate, that I gave up too easily. He did not understand that there was nothing to fight with, no money for lawyers, no leverage of any kind." "That must have been hard," Bennett said. "Losing your husband and then feeling abandoned by your family." "It was," Zara said simply. The old pain stirred in her chest, but somehow it felt less sharp than usual, more like an old injury that ached with weather changes rather than a fresh wound. "But it taught me to be strong. To not need anyone." "There is a difference between being strong and being alone," Bennett observed. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people in, even when you are scared they might hurt you." Zara looked at him sharply. "You seem to have a lot of opinions about how I should live my life." Bennett met her gaze evenly. "Not telling you how to live, just offering a different way of seeing things. You can take it or leave it." There was no defensiveness in his tone, no irritation. He stated his position calmly and left her to make her own choice. Somehow, that made Zara angrier than if he had argued. She wanted a fight, wanted an excuse to push him away, to reinforce those walls that were feeling increasingly unstable. "What makes you think you know anything about my life?" she demanded. "You know nothing about what I have been through, what I have had to do to survive." "You are right," Bennett said calmly. "I do not know everything you have been through. But I know what it looks like when someone is so afraid of being hurt that they hurt themselves by staying isolated. And I see that in you." Zara opened her mouth to snap back, then closed it, because he was right, and they both knew it. She could feel tears burning behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, not in front of this man who saw too much, who seemed to look right past her defenses to the raw, vulnerable person underneath. "I am sorry," Bennett said after a moment. "That was probably too direct. Alina always says I need to work on my diplomacy." "No," Zara said, her voice rough. "You are right. I do push people away. It is easier than risking getting hurt again." She took a shaky breath. "But I do not know how to change that. I do not know how to trust again." "Start small," Bennett suggested. "Trust me to get you to Porterville safely, see how that goes." Despite everything, Zara felt a smile tug at her lips. "All right," she said. "I can do that." They traveled on, and gradually the tension eased. Bennett pointed out a golden eagle soaring overhead. Its wings spread wide as it rode the thermals. He showed her a spring where the water ran clear and cold, and they stopped to refill their canteens and let the animals drink. He told her stories about ranch life, about cattle drives and ornery horses, and the time a young calf had wandered into the bunkhouse and caused complete chaos. Zara found herself laughing, genuine laughter that felt rusty from disuse. She found herself relaxing in Bennett's presence, letting down her guard bit by bit. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump. By the time Porterville came into view in the late morning sun, Zara felt like something fundamental had shifted inside her. The walls around her heart had not come down completely, but there were cracks in them now, places where light could get through. And standing in that light was Bennett Atwood, with his steady presence and his capable hands and his eyes that saw her more clearly than she sometimes saw herself. Porterville was a bustling town, larger than Zara had expected. The main street was wide and well-maintained, lined with shops and businesses. She could see a church at one end, a schoolhouse at the other, and numerous houses spreading out in all directions. There were people everywhere, women shopping, men conducting business, children playing in the spaces between buildings. "Your cousin lives on Cedar Street," Bennett said, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket. "I asked Alina last night and she knew the family. Said they run a dress shop in town. It is this way." He guided her through the streets with confidence, clearly familiar with the town's layout. They drew some curious looks, this dusty cowboy and travel-worn woman with her wagon, but nobody stopped them. Within a few minutes, they were pulling up in front of a neat house with a sign in the front window advertising alterations and custom dressmaking. A woman came out onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair and a warm smile. "Can I help you?" she called out. "I am looking for Mary Miller," Zara said, her voice suddenly nervous. "I am Zara Matthews. I wrote to her about staying here for a while." The woman's face lit up with delight. "Zara, oh my goodness, I am so glad you are here safely." She hurried down the steps and enveloped Zara in an enthusiastic hug. "I have been watching for you for days, hoping you would arrive soon. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from your journey." Zara allowed herself to be pulled into the house, glancing back at Bennett. He had dismounted and was standing by his horse, looking uncertain for the first time since she had met him. She realized he was waiting to see if she needed anything else, if his job of helping her was complete. "Bennett," she called out, "please come in for a moment. Let me at least offer you coffee or water before you ride back." Mary looked between them with obvious curiosity, but had the tact not to ask questions. She welcomed Bennett into her home with the same warmth she had shown Zara, ushering them both into a comfortable parlor and disappearing to fetch refreshments. Bennett stood somewhat awkwardly in the civilized space, his dusty work clothes and spurs seeming out of place among the delicate furniture and lace curtains. Zara felt a sudden rush of affection for him, for this man who was so competent in his own element but clearly uncomfortable in drawing rooms. "You do not have to stay," she said softly. "I know you have work to get back to." "I wanted to make sure you were settled," Bennett replied. "Make sure your cousin was actually here and expecting you." "Always taking care of people," Zara observed. "Only the ones who matter," Bennett said, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. Before she could respond, Mary returned with a tray of coffee and cookies. She settled into a chair and looked at them expectantly. "So, tell me about your journey. It looks like you have had some adventures." Zara explained about the broken wagon wheel, about Bennett finding her and fixing it, about staying the night at Three Rivers Ranch. Mary listened with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at Bennett with an expression that suggested she was reassessing him. "That was incredibly kind of you," Mary said to Bennett. "And brave of you," she added to Zara, "traveling all this way alone." "Bennett says accepting help is not weakness," Zara said, meeting his eyes. "I am trying to learn that." "Good help is worth accepting," Mary agreed. "And it sounds like Mr. Atwood has been very helpful indeed." They finished their coffee and then Bennett stood to leave. "I should head back," he said. "Long ride and I've got work waiting." Zara walked him out to the porch, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Over the past day and night, his presence had become familiar, even comforting. The thought of him riding away and possibly never seeing him again made her chest feel tight. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You saved me, and I will not forget that." "You would have found a way to save yourself," Bennett said. "You are stronger than you think." He mounted his horse, then looked down at her. "Three Rivers Ranch is about 3 hours south of here if you ever need anything, and I come into town most Saturdays for supplies. Maybe I will see you around." "Maybe," Zara said, trying to sound casual despite the way her heart was hammering. Bennett touched the brim of his hat in farewell, then turned his horse and rode away. Zara watched until he disappeared around a corner, feeling oddly bereft. Mary came up beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "That is quite a man," Mary observed. "He is just someone who helped me," Zara said, but even she could hear how unconvincing it sounded. Mary laughed. "Oh, honey, I saw the way you two looked at each other. That was not just someone helping. That was something else entirely." Zara wanted to deny it, but she could not quite form the words, because Mary was right. What she felt for Bennett was not simple gratitude. It was something deeper, something that scared her precisely because it mattered so much. "Come inside," Mary said gently. "Let me show you to your room, and then we can talk about getting you settled here in Porterville." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Mary's house was attached to her shop, and she explained that she ran the dressmaking business with her mother, who was currently visiting relatives in Sacramento. They had a spare bedroom that Zara could use for as long as she needed, and Mary was hopeful that Zara might be interested in learning the dressmaking trade. "I could certainly use the help," Mary said. "We have more orders than we can handle, especially with harvest season coming up. Everyone wants new dresses for the dances and socials." Zara had never done much sewing beyond basic mending, but she was willing to learn. Mary proved to be a patient teacher, showing her the basics of cutting patterns and stitching seams. The work was detail-oriented and required concentration, which Zara found strangely soothing. It gave her hands something to do and her mind something to focus on besides the constant worry about her future. But no matter how busy she kept herself, her thoughts kept drifting to Bennett. She found herself remembering the way he had looked at her, the timbre of his voice, the strength in his hands. She caught herself watching for him on Saturday, even though she told herself she was being foolish. Saturday came, and Zara forced herself to stay busy in the shop. Mary had several customers that morning, and Zara helped with measurements and pinning hems. But every time the bell over the door rang, her eyes would dart up, hoping and fearing it might be Bennett. It was not until late afternoon that he finally appeared. Zara was in the front window, adjusting a display of autumn fabrics, when she saw him riding down the street. Her heart leaped into her throat, and she had to force herself to remain calm, to not rush out onto the street like some eager schoolgirl. Bennett tied his horse in front of the general store across the street, but he glanced toward the dress shop, his eyes scanning the front. When they landed on Zara in the window, his whole face lit up with a smile that made her insides flutter. He raised his hand in greeting and she waved back, feeling suddenly shy. Mary came up behind her. "Are you going to go talk to him or just wave at each other from a distance?" "I am working," Zara said. "You are mooning," Mary corrected. "Go on, I can handle things here. Take your time." Zara did not need to be told twice. She pulled off her work apron and stepped outside, crossing the street to where Bennett stood. Up close, she could see that he had made an effort. His shirt was clean, his face freshly shaved, his hair still damp from washing. "Hello," he said, and there was something in his smile that made her feel warm all over. "Hello," she replied. "How have you been?" "Good, busy. We have been moving cattle to the winter pastures." He glanced down the street, then back at her. "Have you had supper yet?" "Not yet." There is a restaurant a few blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but the food is good. Would you like to join me? Zara knew she should be cautious. She should keep her distance, protect her heart. But looking into Bennett's eyes, seeing the hope and nervousness there, she found she did not want to be cautious. She wanted to take a risk to see where this might lead. I would like that very much, she said. They walked side by side down the street, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Bennett pointed out various businesses and landmarks, telling her stories about the town and its people. He seemed to know everyone, tipping his hat to passing acquaintances and exchanging greetings. The restaurant was small and unpretentious, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of good cooking. Bennett guided her to a table near the window, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat. The gesture was simple but courteous, and Zara found herself appreciating the easy manners that seemed to come naturally to him. They ordered roast chicken and vegetables, and as they waited for their food, they talked. Bennett told her about the ranch, about a new colt that had been born with unusual markings, about Daniel's progress in training a particularly stubborn Mustang. Zara told him about learning to sew, about Mary's kindness, about slowly getting to know Porterville. "Are you happy here?" Bennett asked. Zara considered the question. "I think I could be," she said honestly. "It is a nice town and Mary has been wonderful, but it is strange building a new life from scratch. Some days I feel like I do not know who I am anymore." "Maybe that is not a bad thing," Bennett suggested. "Maybe it is a chance to figure out who you want to be instead of who circumstances forced you to be." "Is that what you did?" Zara asked. "Figured out who you wanted to be, in a way," Bennett said. "When we came to California, I was angry at my father for uprooting us, for leaving everything familiar behind. But working on the ranch, learning the land, I realized I was getting to build my own life. I was not just following the path laid out for me. I was choosing my own way." Their food arrived and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. But Zara's mind was working, turning over his words, choosing her own way, building her own life. It sounded simple when Bennett said it, but the reality was more complex. She had been defined for so long by her relationships to others as a daughter, a wife, a widow. The idea of defining herself on her own terms was both liberating and terrifying. After dinner, Bennett walked her back to Mary's house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The streets were quieter now, most people already home for supper. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden boardwalk. "I am glad I came into town today," Bennett said as they reached Mary's porch. "So am I," Zara admitted. They stood facing each other, and Zara could feel the tension building, that awareness that had been simmering between them since they first met. Bennett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and gentle. "I would like to see you again," he said. "If that is something you might want." Zara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to not take this risk. But a stronger part of her, a part that had been buried under grief and fear, wanted desperately to say yes. "I would like that," she whispered. Bennett's smile was radiant. "Next Saturday, then. I could come early and we could take a ride. There are some beautiful spots around here I would like to show you." "That sounds wonderful." He squeezed her hand gently, then stepped back, his expression reluctant. "I should go. Long ride back to the ranch." "Be safe," Zara said. "Always am," Bennett replied with a grin. He mounted his horse, tipped his hat to her one more time, then rode off into the gathering darkness. Zara stood on the porch long after he disappeared, her hand pressed to her cheek where he had touched her. She felt like something inside her was awakening, some part of herself she thought had died with Thomas. It was hope, she realized. Hope that maybe she could be happy again. Hope that maybe she could trust again. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could love again. The days until the next Saturday seemed to crawl by. Zara threw herself into learning the dressmaking trade, her fingers becoming more nimble with needle and thread. Mary praised her progress, saying she had a natural eye for fitting and alterations. Several customers even requested specifically that Zara work on their garments, saying they liked her careful attention to detail. But no matter how busy she kept herself, Bennett was never far from her thoughts. She replayed their conversations over and over, analyzing every word, every look, every gesture. She felt like a young girl again, experiencing her first infatuation, and the feeling was both delightful and disconcerting. Mary noticed, of course. One evening, as they sat together doing handwork, she looked up from the dress she was hemming and said, "You have it bad for that cowboy, do not you?" Zara felt her cheeks heat. "I do not know what you mean." "Oh, please," Mary said with a laugh. "You get this dreamy look on your face whenever you think about him, and you think about him a lot." "Is it that obvious?" Zara asked miserably. "Only to someone who knows what to look for," Mary assured her, "but I do not think it is a bad thing. Bennett seems like a good man, and Lord knows you deserve some happiness after everything you have been through." "I am scared," Zara admitted. "What if I let myself care and it all goes wrong again? What if I trust him and he turns out to be like Thomas's business partners, just looking for what he can get?" Mary set down her sewing and reached over to take Zara's hand. "I understand that fear. But honey, not every man is going to betray you. Some men actually are what they appear to be. And from everything you have told me, Bennett has been nothing but honorable and kind." "I know," Zara said. "But knowing it in my head and believing it in my heart are two different things." "Then take it slow," Mary advised. "Give yourself time to learn who he really is. But do not shut him out because you are afraid. That is just another way of letting those business partners win, letting them take away your chance at happiness." The words resonated with Zara. She had been giving her fear so much power, letting it control her choices and limit her life. Maybe it was time to reclaim that power, to choose courage over caution. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, and Zara was up early, nervous energy making sleep impossible. She dressed carefully in one of the dresses Mary had made her, a simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her hair and pinned it up, checking her reflection multiple times and feeling foolish for caring so much about her appearance. Bennett arrived mid-morning and Zara's breath caught when she saw him. He was riding a different horse this time, a gentle-looking mare with a soft brown coat. Leading behind him was another horse, saddled and ready. "Thought you might prefer riding to the wagon," he explained as she came outside. "This is Daisy. She is as steady as they come, perfect for someone who might be rusty." "I have not ridden in years," Zara admitted, looking at the mare with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "It will come back to you," Bennett assured her, "and I will be right there if you need help." With Bennett's assistance, Zara mounted the mare. Her muscles remembered the motion even if her mind had forgotten, and soon she was seated comfortably in the saddle. Bennett was right. Daisy was gentle and responsive, and within a few minutes, Zara felt confident enough to follow him out of town. They rode south and west, into the hills that rose beyond Porterville. The trail climbed steadily, winding through oak groves and across meadows still green despite the late season. The air was crisp and cool, scented with sage and dried grass. Bennett rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or stopping to let her catch her breath. After about an hour, they crested a ridge and Bennett pulled his horse to a stop. "Look," he said simply, Zara drew up beside him, and her breath caught. The view was spectacular, stretching for miles in every direction. She could see the valley spread out below, the town of Porterville a small collection of buildings in the distance. To the west, the coastal mountains rose against the horizon, their peaks touched with snow. To the east, she could see the foothills climbing toward the Sierra Nevada, ridge after ridge fading into blue distance. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "One of my favorite spots," Bennett said. "I come here sometimes when I need to think or when the world feels too small." They dismounted and walked to a flat rock that offered a natural seat. Bennett pulled canteens and a wrapped package of food from his saddlebag, bread and cheese and apples that he had clearly packed with care. They sat side by side, eating and looking out over the vast landscape. "What do you think about?" Zara asked. "When you come here to think?" Bennett was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Lots of things. The future mostly. What I want my life to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Whether I want to keep working for someone else or if I should try to start my own place." "Do you want your own ranch?" Zara asked. "Maybe," Bennett said. "I have been saving money for years, putting away every spare dollar. I have got my eye on a piece of land east of here, about 500 acres with good water and decent grass. The owner is getting old, and I think he might be willing to sell in the next year or so." He glanced at her. "But it is a lot of work, starting from scratch. And it is a lonely business if you are doing it alone." Zara's heart stuttered at the implication in his words. "Is that why you have not bought it yet? Because you would be alone?" "Partly," Bennett admitted, "but also because the timing was not right. I was not ready." He turned to face her fully. "I am ready now, though, or at least, I think I could be ready with the right person beside me." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Zara knew what he was saying, understood the question he was asking without asking it directly. He was telling her that he saw a future that included her, that he was willing to wait if she needed time. "Bennett," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I care about you, more than I expected to, more than I wanted to, but I am terrified." "I know," he said gently. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb rubbing small circles on her palm. "I am scared too. It is always scary, opening yourself up to someone, trusting them with your heart. But I think you are worth the risk. I think what we could have together is worth the risk." "What if I cannot do it?" Zara whispered. "What if my walls are too high, too strong? What if I hurt you because I cannot let you in?" "Then we will take them down brick by brick," Bennett said. "However long it takes. I am a patient man, Zara, and you are worth waiting for." Tears were streaming down Zara's face now, but they were not entirely sad tears. They were tears of release, of long-held tension finally easing. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. "I want to try," she said. "I want to believe that I can do this, that I can trust you. But you need to be patient with me. I am going to mess this up sometimes. I am going to push you away when I get scared." "I can handle that," Bennett said. He reached up with his free hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheek. "As long as you promise to let me back in when you do. As long as you promise to keep trying." "I promise," Zara said. Bennett smiled, and then he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and patience and hope. Zara felt something inside her crack wide open, felt the walls around her heart beginning to crumble. She kissed him back, pouring into it all the fear and hope and longing she had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "This is terrifying," she whispered. "I know," Bennett said, "but we will figure it out together." They sat together on that rock for hours, talking and watching the light change across the valley. Bennett told her more about his dreams for the future, about the kind of ranch he wanted to build, the kind of life he wanted to live. Zara found herself sharing her own dreams, some she had not even realized she had. She talked about wanting to create something lasting, to build a home that felt safe and full of love. She talked about wanting children someday, though the thought terrified her after watching so many of her friends struggle through childbirth. "We would take care of you," Bennett said firmly. "You and any children we might have. I would move heaven and earth to keep you safe." The casual way he said "we" and "our" made Zara's heart swell. He was already seeing them as a unit, already planning a future together. It should have scared her more than it did, but instead it felt right. The sun was beginning to set when they finally mounted up and headed back to Porterville. The ride back was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts, but it was a comfortable silence. Bennett rode closer this time, their horses almost touching, and occasionally their legs would brush together in the saddle. When they reached Mary's house, Bennett helped Zara dismount, his hands lingering on her waist. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "There is a church social in the evening. I thought maybe we could go together." "I would like that," Zara said. Bennett kissed her again, a brief press of lips that still managed to make her dizzy. "Until tomorrow, then." Zara watched him ride away, then turned to find Mary watching from the window with a knowing smile. She went inside to face her cousin's inevitable teasing, but she did not mind. For the first time in 3 years, she felt truly happy. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Bennett came to town every Saturday, and they would spend the day together, sometimes riding out to beautiful spots in the countryside, sometimes just walking around Porterville and talking. He came to church with her on Sundays, sitting beside her in the pew and singing hymns in a surprisingly good baritone. He attended the harvest dance and waltzed with her until her feet hurt, holding her close and whispering things that made her blush. With each day that passed, Zara felt herself falling deeper in love with him. It was different from what she had felt for Thomas. That had been the infatuation of youth, passionate but ultimately shallow. What she felt for Bennett was deeper, more solid. It was built on respect and genuine understanding, on shared values and complementary dreams. But it was not without its challenges. True to her prediction, there were times when fear would rise up and she would push Bennett away, picking fights or withdrawing into cold silence. The first time it happened, Bennett had looked hurt and confused, but he had not gotten angry. He had simply said, "I am going to go for a ride and give you some space, but I will be back tomorrow and we can talk about whatever is scaring you." He had kept his promise, returning the next day calm and ready to listen. Zara had broken down and explained that she had been terrified he was getting bored with her, that he would realize she was not worth the effort. Bennett had held her and told her firmly that he was not going anywhere, that she could not scare him off that easily. It became their pattern. Zara would panic and push, and Bennett would step back but never leave completely. And each time, it got a little easier for her to trust that he would stay, that his love was not conditional on her being perfect. Eleanor Three Rivers had invited them both to dinner one Sunday, and Zara had been nervous about it. She knew how much Bennett valued the Three Rivers family, how important their opinion was to him. What if they did not approve of her? What if they thought she was not good enough for him? But her fears had been groundless. Eleanor welcomed her with a warm hug, and Jacob shook her hand with genuine warmth. Marcus and Daniel treated her like she was already part of the family, teasing her good-naturedly and telling embarrassing stories about Bennett. Over roast beef and potatoes, the conversation flowed easily, and Zara found herself laughing more than she had in years. After dinner, Eleanor pulled her aside while the men were outside looking at a new horse. "I want you to know that we are so happy Bennett found you," she said. He has been alone too long, keeping himself closed off. You are good for him. You make him happy." "He makes me happy too," Zara said, "though I am not sure I deserve him." "Nonsense," Alina said firmly. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, dear, and so does he. You are good for each other." She paused, then added, "Bennett told us he is planning to make an offer on the Carlson place. Is that something you two have discussed?" "A little," Zara admitted. "He has talked about wanting his own ranch, but we have not really talked about the details or the timeline." Alina nodded thoughtfully. "Well, when you do talk about it, I want you to know that we will help however we can. Bennett is like family to us, and that means you are too now. Building a new ranch is not easy, but with good people supporting you, it is possible." The conversation stayed with Zara as they rode back to Porterville that evening. She was quiet, thinking about the future, about what it might look like to build a life with Bennett. He noticed her silence and reached over to take her hand. "What is on your mind?" he asked. "Alina mentioned the Carlson place," Zara said. "Are you serious about buying it?" "I am," Bennett said. "Old man Carlson told me last week that he is ready to sell. His children have all moved away, and he wants to go live with his daughter in San Francisco. He is giving me first option to buy." "That is wonderful," Zara said. "What is the place like?" "Beautiful," Bennett said, and his voice was full of enthusiasm. 500 acres with a creek running through the middle. Good grass, some wooded areas, enough flat land for buildings and corrals. There is a small cabin already there, nothing fancy but solid and weatherproof. It would be a lot of work, but I could make it into something special." "It sounds perfect," Zara said. Bennett was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "I have been thinking about the timing. I have enough saved for a down payment, and I think I could swing the payments if I keep working at 3 Rivers while I build up the herd. It would be tight for the first few years, and it would mean a lot of hard work, but it is doable." Zara understood what he was not saying, the question he was circling around. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking?" Bennett pulled his horse to a stop and turned to face her. Even in the darkness, she could see the intensity in his eyes. "Zara Matthews, I love you. I think I loved you from the moment I saw you standing by that broken wagon, stubborn and scared and too proud to ask for help. You are the strongest, bravest woman I know, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you can trust me, that you can trust love." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring, a gold band with a small stone that caught the moonlight. "I know it is not fancy, but it belonged to my grandmother, and it is the most precious thing I own. I want you to have it. I want you to marry me and build a life with me on the Carlson place. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to have children with you and grow old with you and love you until my last breath." Tears were streaming down Zara's face again, but this time they were entirely happy tears. All the fear and doubt seemed to fall away, leaving only certainty. This was right. Bennett was right. They were right together. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Bennett Atwood. I love you so much it terrifies me, but I am not going to let that fear stop me anymore. I want all of that. I want all of it with you." Bennett let out a whoop of joy and practically fell off his horse in his haste to reach her. He pulled her down from the saddle and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "When?" he asked, kissing her between words. "When will you marry me?" "Soon," Zara said. "I do not want to wait. There has been too much waiting already, too much time wasted being afraid." "Next month then," Bennett said. "As soon as we can arrange it. We can have the ceremony at the church in Porterville, and Alina can help with the preparations. It will be simple but perfect." They sealed the promise with a kiss that seemed to last forever. and when they finally made it back to Porterville, Zara felt like she was floating. Mary took one look at the ring on her finger and let out a squeal of delight that probably woke half the neighborhood. She hugged them both and immediately began planning, full of ideas about dresses and flowers and food. The next month was a whirlwind of preparation. Mary made Zara a beautiful wedding dress in cream-colored silk with lace trim, staying up late every night to finish it in time. Eleanor coordinated with the church and arranged for a small reception at Three Rivers Ranch. The whole community seemed to get involved, everyone excited about the wedding. Bennett worked with a lawyer to finalize the purchase of the Carlson place, and every spare moment was spent out there, fixing up the cabin and starting to build corrals and outbuildings. Zara went with him whenever she could, helping to paint walls and hang curtains, beginning to make the simple cabin into a home. Standing in what would be their bedroom, looking out the window at the creek and the rolling hills beyond, Zara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. This was what she had been looking for without even knowing it. Not just a place, but a purpose. Not just a house, but a home built on love and trust. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, one of those perfect October days when California seems like paradise. Zara dressed in Mary's house with her cousin's help, looking at herself in the mirror and barely recognizing the happy, glowing woman looking back. Where there had once been shadows under her eyes and tension in her jaw, there was now only joy and anticipation. "You are beautiful," Mary said, adjusting the veil. "Bennett is going to cry when he sees you." "Good," Zara said with a laugh. "I have cried enough for both of us over the past months. It is his turn." The church was packed when they arrived, filled with people from town, and from Three Rivers Ranch, and even some folks who had traveled from neighboring areas. Zara recognized the friendly faces of Eleanor and Jacob, of Marcus and Daniel, of shopkeepers she had gotten to know during her time in Porterville. It felt like the whole community had come to celebrate with them. But she only had eyes for Bennett, standing at the front of the church in his best suit, his hair slicked back and his eyes fixed on the door. When she started down the aisle on Mary's arm, her cousin insisting on giving her away, she saw tears start to slide down his cheeks, just as Mary had predicted. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed her with such tender passion that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception at Three Rivers Ranch was a joyful celebration. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Zara danced with Bennett first, then with Jacob and Marcus and Daniel, then with Bennett again because he could not bear to have her in anyone else's arms for long. Eleanor toasted them with sparkling cider, wishing them all the happiness in the world. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Bennett whisked Zara away to a wagon he had decorated with ribbons and flowers. Their friends and neighbors threw rice and called out good wishes as they drove away toward their new home, their new life. The cabin was lit with candles when they arrived, and Zara realized Bennett must have come earlier to prepare it. There were wildflowers in jars on the table, fresh wood stacked by the fireplace, their bed made up with new quilts. It was simple but perfect, every detail showing his care and thoughtfulness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Atwood," Bennett said, sweeping her up in his arms and carrying her over the threshold. "I like the sound of that," Zara said, kissing him. "Mrs. Atwood, your wife." That night, as they lay together in their bed listening to the creek babble and the wind sigh through the oaks, Zara felt the last of her walls finally crumble. Bennett held her close, his hand resting over her heart, and she felt truly safe for the first time since Thomas had died. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she whispered into the darkness. "This happy, this hopeful." "You deserve all of it," Bennett said, kissing her forehead. "Every bit of happiness, every dream that comes true, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was good. Building a ranch from almost nothing required endless work. Bennett continued at 3 Rivers 3 days a week for steady income, while spending the other days working their own land. Zara kept up her work with Mary, sewing dresses and saving every penny they could. They bought their first small herd of cattle in the spring, just 20 head to start. Bennett worked with Daniel to break a few wild horses, building up their string. They planted a kitchen garden, fixed fences, built a proper barn. Every improvement was modest but meaningful, each step forward bringing them closer to their dream. It was hard work, often backbreaking. There were days when Zara fell into bed exhausted, her hands blistered and her back aching. But Bennett was always there beside her, equally tired, and they would laugh about their aches and pains and plan for tomorrow. The community rallied around them in ways that touched Zara deeply. Jacob 3 Rivers sold them cattle at below market price. Marcus helped them build their barn, refusing payment and saying it was a wedding gift. Women from the church showed up one day with food and supplies, organizing a work party that resulted in a chicken coop and a storage shed. Zara learned that Alina had been right. Out here, people took care of each other. Help did not always come with strings attached. Sometimes it was just genuine kindness, the knowledge that everyone needed support sometimes. She also learned to trust Bennett's love fully. He proved himself every day in countless small ways. The way he always made coffee in the morning so she could sleep a few minutes longer. The way he would rub her sore feet at night. The way he listened when she talked about her fears and dreams. He never dismissed her feelings or told her she was being silly. He just loved her, steadily and completely. A year after their wedding, Zara realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She remembered her friends' difficult births, the dangers of childbirth on the frontier. But Bennett was thrilled, his face lighting up with pure happiness when she told him. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." The pregnancy was easier than Zara had feared, though the last months were uncomfortable in the summer heat. Bennett fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more, doing extra work to make up for what she could not do. Alina came to stay with them the last 2 weeks, her experience and calm presence reassuring. When labor started on a hot July night, Zara was terrified. But Alina was there, guiding her through it, and Bennett held her hand and whispered encouragement even as she screamed and cursed him. 18 hours later, their son was born, a healthy baby with a strong cry in his father's eyes. They named him Thomas Bennett Atwood, honoring both the past and the future. Holding him for the first time, Zara felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. This tiny person, this perfect combination of her and Bennett, represented everything she had never dared to hope for. Bennett cried when he held his son, tears of pure joy streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "You are perfect. Our family is perfect." The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their herd grew slowly but steadily. They added a second bedroom to the cabin, then a third. 2 years after Thomas was born, they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's stubborn determination from the moment she entered the world. 3 years after that came another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful from the start. Through it all, Bennett and Zara's love deepened. They had disagreements. Of course, you could not build a ranch and raise children without occasional conflicts. But they learned to talk through their problems, to compromise, to remember that they were on the same team. Zara sometimes thought back to that day when her wagon wheel broke, when she had been stranded and alone and convinced that she could only depend on herself. She thought about how different her life would be if Bennett had not come along, if she had not been brave enough to accept his help, to let down her walls and trust again. The Atwood Ranch grew into a respected operation, known for quality cattle and honest dealing. They never became wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide for their children and help their neighbors when needed. Thomas, Sarah, and James grew up strong and confident, surrounded by love and the wide open spaces of California. Mary married a banker from Sacramento and moved away, but she and Zara remained close, writing letters and visiting when they could. Eleanor and Jacob became like parents to Zara, loving her as one of their own. The Three Rivers sons married and had children of their own, and the connection between the two families remained strong. On their 10th anniversary, Bennett took Zara back to that ridge where he had first told her he was ready to build a future with her. They sat on the same rock, older now, marked by sun and work and the passage of years, but still deeply in love. "Do you ever regret it?" Bennett asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Choosing this life, it has not been easy." "Not for a single moment," Zara said firmly. She turned to look at him, at the face she knew better than her own, at the eyes that still made her heart skip a beat. "You taught me that I could trust again, that I could love again. You broke down every wall I had built around my heart, and I am so grateful for that. This life, our family, everything we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I am the lucky one," Bennett said, kissing her softly. "That day I found you by your broken wagon, I thought I was just helping a stranger. I did not know I was meeting my future, the woman who would make every dream I had better than I imagined it could be." They sat together as the sun set, watching the light paint the valley in shades of gold and amber, and Zara felt complete. The scared, grieving widow who had traveled to California looking for a fresh start had found so much more than that. She had found home. She had found family. She had found love that healed old wounds and built new dreams. The years continued to pass, bringing the ordinary miracles of life. Thomas grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Sarah proved to have a talent for horses, training them with a gentleness and intuition that amazed everyone. James showed an interest in the law, reading every book he could get his hands on and eventually going to study in San Francisco. Bennett's hair turned silver at the temples, and laugh lines deepened around Zara's eyes. They added more land to the ranch when the opportunity arose, building it into something that could support their children and, eventually, their grandchildren. The cabin was expanded and improved until it was a comfortable ranch house, filled with the noise and chaos of family gatherings. When Thomas married a sweet girl from Porterville, he and his wife built a house on the eastern section of the ranch. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a horse breeder from Nevada, but she and her husband settled close enough to visit regularly. James married a woman he met at university and practiced law in Sacramento, but he came home for holidays and brought his own children to run wild on the ranch where he had grown up. Grandchildren arrived, squalling babies who grew into rambunctious children. Bennett was a wonderful grandfather, patient and playful, teaching his grandchildren to ride and rope the way he had taught his own children. Zara loved watching him with them, seeing how naturally love and wisdom flowed from him. They celebrated their 25th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors. Looking around at all the people who had come to celebrate with them, at the life they had built together, Zara felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, alone again in their bedroom, Bennett pulled her close. They had both changed so much from the young people who had met on a dusty California road, but the connection between them had only grown stronger. "What are you thinking about?" Bennett asked, sensing her reflective mood. "That broken wagon wheel," Zara said with a soft laugh. "How it seemed like such a disaster at the time, being stranded in the middle of nowhere with no help. And now I see it was the best thing that could have happened to me. If that wheel had not broken, we never would have met." "I prefer to think we would have found each other somehow," Bennett said. "Some things are just meant to be." "Maybe," Zara agreed. She turned in his arms to face him, running her fingers through his silver hair. "But I am glad it happened the way it did. I am glad you were the one who found me. I am glad you had the patience to fix more than just my wagon wheel." "You did not need fixing," Bennett said firmly. "You just needed someone to show you it was safe to hope again, to love again. You did all the hard work yourself." They held each other close. These two people who had taken such different paths to find each other, who had chosen to trust when trust seemed impossible, who had built something beautiful from broken pieces. The years continued their steady march. Eleanor and Jacob passed away within months of each other, having lived long, full lives surrounded by the family they loved. The loss hit hard, but the legacy they left of kindness and hard work and generous spirits lived on in everyone they had touched. Bennett and Zara grew older gracefully, their bodies slowing but their love remaining constant. They spent long evenings on their porch, watching the sun set over land they had nurtured for decades, talking about everything and nothing, content in each other's presence. Their grandchildren brought great-grandchildren to meet them, tiny babies with their whole lives ahead of them. Zara would hold these little ones and think about continuity, about how love and family created connections that stretched across generations. She thought about the walls she had once built so carefully, and how glad she was that Bennett had knocked them down. On a spring morning, in their 43rd year of marriage, Bennett woke before dawn as he always had. He looked at Zara sleeping beside him, her hair now completely white, her face deeply lined but still beautiful to him. He thought about the life they had shared, the adventures and challenges, the ordinary days that had woven together into an extraordinary tapestry. He thought about a young woman standing by a broken wagon, too proud and too scared to ask for help. He thought about how fixing that wheel had led to fixing something much more important, two wounded hearts that had healed together. When Zara woke, she found him watching her with that same look he had given her on their wedding day, full of love and wonder. "Good morning, Mrs. Atwood," he said, as he had said almost every morning for 43 years. "Good morning, Mr. Atwood," she replied, as she always did. "I love you." "I love you too," Bennett said, "today and always." They rose together and faced another day, their love as steady and reliable as the sun rising over the California hills. The ranch continued its rhythms around them, cattle lowing, horses whinnying, the eternal work of maintaining land and life. Thomas managed most of the daily operations now, but Bennett still liked to ride out and check the fences, and Zara still tended her garden. In the evening, the extended family gathered for supper, as they often did. The house was full of noise and laughter, multiple conversations happening at once, children running between the adults' legs. Zara stood in her kitchen, looking out at all these people who existed because she had been brave enough to accept help that day so long ago, brave enough to trust again, brave enough to love again. Bennett came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, though he probably already knew. "That everything I have, everything I love started with a broken wagon wheel," Zara said, "and a cowboy who was kind enough to stop and help a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Bennett said. stopping that day. Though I do not think I really had a choice. Something told me you were important that I could not just ride by. Fate, Zara asked with a smile. Love, Bennett replied simply, recognizing it before I even had a name for what I was feeling. They stood together, watching their family, and Zara felt the completeness of a life well lived. She had come to California a broken, grieving widow with nothing but a wagon and a stubborn determination to survive. She had found so much more than survival. She had found healing and hope, and a love that had sustained her through decades of building a life together. The walls around her heart had been formidable, built from pain and betrayal and loss. But Bennett had been patient, chipping away at them brick by brick with his steady kindness and unwavering love. He had shown her that trust was not foolishness, and that vulnerability was not weakness. He had taught her that opening your heart again after it had been broken was not just possible, it was essential to truly living. As the stars came out over the ranch that night, Bennett and Zara sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The sounds of family gradually faded as children were put to bed and adults said their goodnights. Finally, they were alone with the night and each other. No regrets, Bennett asked, though he asked not out of doubt but out of the desire to hear her answer. Not a single one, Zara said firmly, lacing her fingers through his. Every moment, every choice, every challenge brought me here to this life with you. How could I regret any of it? They sat in comfortable silence, these two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other every day for more than 4 decades. The California night wrapped around them, full of cricket song and the distant call of an owl, the same eternal rhythms that had marked their years together. Inside the house, their legacy slept. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them touched by the love that had started with a broken wagon wheel and a cowboy brave enough to stop, patient enough to wait, and loving enough to show a wounded woman that her heart could heal. Zara leaned her head on Bennett's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, and smiled into the darkness. She had traveled so far from that desperate, frightened woman on a dusty California road. She had learned that walls built to protect could also imprison, that help offered in kindness was a gift to be accepted, and that love, real, enduring love, was worth every risk. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Bennett asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "For fixing my wagon," Zara said, "and for being patient enough to fix everything else." Bennett chuckled softly, the sound rumbling in his chest. "It was never about fixing you, Zara. It was about showing you that you were never really broken, just hurting. And that with time and care and love, anything can heal." They sat together under the stars, their hands clasped, their hearts beating in familiar rhythm. Behind them stood the house they had built, full of memories and love. Around them spread the land they had nurtured, testament to their hard work and dedication. And inside them both burned that same love that had ignited on a California road so many years ago, a love that had weathered every storm and only grown stronger. As the moon rose over the hills and the night deepened around them, Bennett and Zara Atwood sat together in perfect contentment. Two souls who had found each other, healed together, and built a life that exceeded every dream. The broken wagon wheel that had brought them together was long gone, rotted back into the earth. But what it had set in motion, a love story for the ages, a family that would span generations, a legacy of kindness and courage would endure forever. And that, Zara thought as sleep began to tug at her consciousness, was everything she had never known she needed, everything she had been too afraid to hope for, and absolutely everything she had always deserved. The walls were gone, replaced by wide open spaces filled with love and trust and endless possibility. And it all began because a cowboy stopped to help a stranger, and a wounded woman found the courage to let him in.